On April 17, 2019, in a small town just outside Montgomery, Alabama, 21-year-old Sarah Mitchell's life changed forever. The psychology student at Auburn University had always felt something was amiss in her family history. Born in 1998 to Linda and Robert Mitchell, Sarah had grown up with lingering questions about her past and peculiar family dynamics that never quite made sense. The weather that spring day was unseasonably warm as Sarah sat in her apartment, staring at the results of a popular DNA ancestry test she had ordered weeks earlier out of curiosity. What began as a simple exploration of her heritage revealed something far more disturbing. The genetic markers indicated a parental relationship that was impossible to ignore. Her biological parents were closely related. "I remember my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone," Sarah would later tell investigators. "Everything I thought I knew about myself suddenly collapsed." Sarah had grown up in a seemingly normal household in Tallahassee, a small community where everyone knew each other. Her father, Robert, worked as a construction foreman, while her mother, Linda, was a part-time receptionist at a local medical clinic. They were quiet, church-going people who kept to themselves. Sarah was their only child, born when Linda was 29 and Robert was 35. At least that's what the family narrative had always maintained. The first red flags had appeared during Sarah's high school years, when she needed her birth certificate for a driver's license application. The document seemed new, with filing dates that didn't align with her birth year. When questioned, her parents dismissed her concerns, claiming it was a reissued document after the original was lost in a basement flood. The first 48 hours after Sarah's discovery were a blur of disbelief, anger, and profound confusion. She reached out to her mother, confronting her with trembling voice. Linda's initial denial quickly crumbled into tears, confirming Sarah's worst fears without explicit admission. Initial searches through family albums and documents revealed an unsettling lack of pregnancy photos, baby pictures, or hospital records. It was as if Sarah's early existence had been deliberately undocumented. The family's relocation from northern Alabama to Tallahassee, when Sarah was just 2 years old, suddenly took on new significance. Was it an attempt to escape scrutiny? Sarah took her findings to the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department on April 19, 2019. Detective James Harmon, a 15-year veteran specializing in familial crimes, was assigned to the case. His initial assessment noted, "Complainant presents with substantial evidence suggesting genetic parentage inconsistent with legal documentation. Case requires immediate investigation into potential familial code violations and records falsification." If you want to follow more cases like this that shake entire communities and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any investigation. Detective Harmon's first steps involved gathering documentation. Birth records from the Alabama Department of Public Health showed inconsistencies. Sarah's birth certificate had indeed been issued in 2000, 2 years after her supposed birth date. The original filing could not be located in state records. "In my years handling sensitive cases, document anomalies are often our first concrete evidence," Harmon noted in his case files. The timing of the reissued certificate coincided with the family's relocation to Tallahassee, suggesting a coordinated effort to establish a new narrative. The investigation quickly expanded to include the Department of Human Resources, which had no prior records of intervention with the family. School records showed Sarah had been homeschooled until 4th grade, limiting outside observation during her early childhood. Harmon's team conducted interviews with former neighbors from the Mitchells' previous residence in Scottsboro, a small town in Jackson County. Their testimonies painted a troubling picture. Several remembered Linda Mitchell having a younger sister, Rebecca, who had disappeared from family gatherings around 1997. One neighbor, Eleanor Dawson, recalled, "Those sisters were inseparable until Rebecca suddenly wasn't around anymore. Linda told everyone she'd moved to Atlanta for college, but no one ever heard from her again." Medical records subpoenaed from northern Alabama hospitals revealed that Rebecca Chambers, Linda's younger sister, had been admitted to Highlands Medical Center in Scottsboro in January 1998 for childbirth. The father's information was conspicuously absent from these records. Rebecca was 17 at the time. The investigation faced significant obstacles. Records from the late 1990s were often still in paper form, scattered across county offices. The Chambers family patriarch, Joseph Chambers, had been a respected deacon at First Baptist Church of Scottsboro and maintained close relationships with local officials, potentially explaining how certain documents had disappeared from county records. By June 2019, investigators had developed a troubling theory. Robert Mitchell, who was married to Linda, had fathered a child with her teenage sister Rebecca. The family then orchestrated an elaborate cover-up, with Linda and Robert raising the child as their own after Rebecca's disappearance from public life. DNA testing would be crucial to confirming these suspicions. On June 12, 2019, Detective Harmon obtained a warrant for DNA samples from both Linda and Robert Mitchell. Linda complied willingly, appearing resigned to the unraveling of long-held secrets. Robert, however, fled their Tallahassee home the night before the scheduled collection. This sudden flight launched a multi-agency search across 3 states. The U.S. Marshals Service joined the investigation, tracking Robert's credit card usage to a motel outside Chattanooga, Tennessee, where he was apprehended on June 17, 2019. His DNA sample was collected upon extradition to Alabama. Throughout this phase, investigators were also searching for Rebecca Chambers. Hospital records showed she had been discharged 3 days after giving birth, but there was no further documentation of her existence in any state database. No driver's license renewals, tax filings, or employment records had appeared under her name since 1998. The investigation expanded to include searches of property records. The Chambers family owned an isolated hunting cabin in the Bankhead National Forest. Permission to search the property was initially denied by Joseph Chambers, requiring investigators to secure another warrant. The digital age provided unexpected leads. Anonymous tips began arriving after a local Montgomery news station ran a segment about the case. One tipster, a former nurse at Highlands Medical Center, recalled unusual circumstances surrounding Rebecca's hospital stay, including late-night visits from Joseph Chambers and Linda, with hospital staff being instructed to limit documentation about the patient. As summer 2019 progressed, investigators pieced together a timeline suggesting a carefully orchestrated family conspiracy spanning more than 2 decades, leaving Sarah Mitchell caught in the center of a web of deception that had shaped her entire existence. The forensic results arrived on July 8, 2019, confirming investigators' darkest suspicions. The DNA analysis established beyond scientific doubt that Robert Mitchell was Sarah's biological father, but Linda Mitchell was not her mother. The genetic markers strongly suggested Sarah's biological mother was a close blood relative of Linda, consistent with her being Linda's sister. The DNA evidence presents an unambiguous conclusion, stated the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences report. The genetic relationship between Subject A, Sarah Mitchell, and Subject B, Robert Mitchell, is consistent with paternal parentage. The relationship between Subject A and Subject C, Linda Mitchell, indicates they are not mother and daughter, but share approximately 25% genetic material, consistent with an aunt-niece relationship. This scientific confirmation shifted the investigation from establishing facts to determining criminal liability. Alabama Code Section 13A.13.3 classifies incest as a Class C felony, but the statute of limitations presented complications. More pressing were potential charges of kidnapping, identity fraud, and filing false government documents. On July 15, 2019, investigators executed the search warrant for the Chambers family cabin in Bankhead National Forest. The remote property, accessible only by a half-mile dirt road, had stood largely unused for years according to neighboring property owners. What they discovered there sent shockwaves through the investigation team. In a locked basement room, investigators found evidence that someone had lived there for an extended period, possibly years. Personal effects, including women's clothing, handwritten journals, and medication bottles prescribed to Rebecca Chambers, dated as recently as 2007, suggested she had been kept there long after her supposed disappearance. The journals, spanning from 1998 to 2007, provided the most disturbing evidence yet. Written in increasingly erratic handwriting, they documented Rebecca's pregnancy at 17, the birth of her daughter, and her subsequent confinement. Early entries described how her father and sister convinced her that institutionalization was the only alternative to the family's private solution. Later entries revealed a woman struggling with deteriorating mental health and resignation to her circumstances. The final entry, dated March 12, 2007, simply read, "I pray she never learns the truth." The search also uncovered financial records, showing regular cash withdrawals from a family trust to maintain Rebecca's isolation. Prescription records suggested she had been heavily medicated, often with antipsychotics and sedatives in concerning combinations. By late July, the investigation took another turn when cadaver dogs were brought to the property. In a wooded area approximately 200 yards from the cabin, they indicated the presence of human remains. Forensic excavation revealed a burial site containing skeletal remains, later identified through dental records as Rebecca Chambers. Forensic anthropologists estimated she had died approximately 12 years earlier, consistent with the final journal entry. The medical examiner's report identified the cause of death as a probable overdose of prescription medications, though whether intentional or accidental could not be determined. Toxicology analysis of hair samples indicated long-term exposure to multiple psychiatric medications. On August 3, 2019, Joseph Chambers, now 78 and suffering from early-stage dementia, was questioned about his daughter's death. His lucid moments yielded devastating admissions. "We did what had to be done," he told investigators. "The family name had to be protected." This revelation devastated Sarah, who learned not only of her true parentage, but also of her biological mother's tragic fate. "I existed because of a crime, was raised in a lie, and never got to know the woman who gave birth to me," she told victim advocates. "She was erased while I lived in the same house as her abuser." Leave in the comments. Never give up on truth if you believe all victims deserve justice, no matter how long it takes. By September 2019, prosecutors from the Alabama Attorney General's office had assembled a case spanning multiple jurisdictions and decades. The charges were extensive. Robert Mitchell faced charges of second-degree rape, incest, kidnapping, falsifying government records, and being an accessory to unlawful imprisonment. Linda Mitchell was charged with kidnapping, falsifying government records, unlawful imprisonment, and abuse of a vulnerable adult. Joseph Chambers, despite his diminished mental capacity, was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, abuse of a vulnerable adult, and improper disposal of human remains. The case against Robert Mitchell was the most straightforward. DNA evidence confirmed he had fathered a child with his 17-year-old sister-in-law when he was 34, a clear violation of Alabama's statutory rape and incest laws. Though the statute of limitations had expired on some potential charges, prosecutors employed the continuing crime doctrine, arguing that the ongoing concealment constituted an unbroken chain of criminal activity. On November 12, 2019, Robert Mitchell accepted a plea agreement, admitting to second-degree rape and falsifying government records. He received a 15-year sentence with no possibility of parole and was required to register as a sex offender. Linda Mitchell's case proved more complex. Her defense team portrayed her as another victim of Robert's manipulation and her father's domineering influence. Psychological evaluations suggested she had experienced long-term emotional abuse. Nevertheless, her active participation in confining her sister and maintaining the deception could not be excused. In February 2020, she pleaded guilty to falsifying government records and being an accessory to unlawful imprisonment, receiving an 8-year sentence with eligibility for parole after 3 years. Joseph Chambers was eventually found incompetent to stand trial due to advancing dementia. He was remanded to a secure medical facility, where he died in April 2020, without ever facing full legal accountability. For Sarah Mitchell, the legal proceedings provided answers, but little comfort. The truth had cost her every familial relationship and foundation of her identity. "I lost the parents I thought I had, the mother I never knew I had, and any sense of where I belong in the world," she stated during a victim impact statement. The case prompted reviews of Alabama's family services protocols and vital records procedures. State lawmakers introduced legislation to enhance monitoring of homeschooled children and strengthen reporting requirements for healthcare providers who encounter potential abuse situations. The Rebecca Chambers Act, introduced in the Alabama legislature in 2021, proposed extending the statute of limitations for crimes involving familial sexual abuse and establishing a special task force for cold cases involving missing persons with suspicious family circumstances. Perhaps most significantly, Sarah Mitchell established the Rebecca Chambers Foundation, dedicated to supporting victims of familial abuse and advocating for enhanced oversight of homeschooled children. "My mother was silenced, her existence erased," Sarah explained at the foundation's launch. "This foundation ensures that her name and her story serve as a catalyst for change." The case also highlighted troubling intersections of religious authority, rural isolation, and family power dynamics that can enable abuse. In small communities where family patriarchs hold positions of respect and authority, reporting suspicions often means confronting entrenched power structures. Dr. Eleanor Hansen, a forensic psychologist who consulted on the case, noted, "What makes this case particularly disturbing is how many systems had to fail simultaneously for this deception to continue for decades. Medical professionals, government officials, educational authorities, and community members all missed or ignored warning signs." For investigators, the case underscored the value of genetic genealogy in resolving long-buried secrets. Detective Harmon has since specialized in cold cases involving family abductions and identity fraud. "DNA doesn't lie, and it doesn't forget," he often tells new officers. "The truth finds a way to surface, even decades later." Today, Sarah Mitchell continues her advocacy work while completing a doctorate in psychology, specializing in trauma recovery. She has legally changed her name and rebuilt her identity on her own terms. "I couldn't control how my life began," she stated in a rare media interview, "but I can determine what it means and where it leads." The remote cabin where Rebecca Chambers spent her final years has been demolished and the property donated to a conservation trust. A small memorial marks the site, bearing only the words, "Rebecca Chambers, 1980-2007, remembered at last." If you watched until here, it's because you care about these cases that mark families forever. Leave a comment saying, "I watched until here," so I can get to know you and know who really cares about the search for truth. If this story moved you, please like this video and share it with someone who values justice and truth. Subscribe to the channel for more investigations that bring hidden truths to light.